A Russian city just shook like an earthquake, and the cause was a Ukrainian drone, 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, not near the front, not in a war zone. Deep inside Russia, in a city millions of Russians believed was completely untouchable. If you think that's the most alarming thing happening inside Russia right now, stay with us, because what comes next is far worse. If you're following this war daily, hit like right now. This analysis is updated every single day, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Russia is fracturing. Not slowly, not quietly, rapidly, visibly, and in ways that are beginning to echo the final months of the Soviet Union. The Wall Street Journal's Walter Russell Mead, one of the most respected geopolitical analysts in the world, has come forward with a stunning assessment. The man who spent 2 decades humiliating the West, seizing Georgia, swallowing Crimea, projecting power across Africa and the Middle East, may ultimately go down in history not as the man who restored Russian greatness, but as the man who destroyed it. What went wrong? And more importantly, how bad does it actually get from here? Keep watching. Let's start with what happened in Ekaterinburg on April 25th. At 7 in the morning, an explosion ripped through the city. Residents described the blast, shaking their cars like a violent earthquake. Ekaterinburg sits roughly 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, a distance that, until that morning, made the city feel completely immune. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy confirmed it plainly. Ukraine can now strike targets more than 1,500 kilometers inside Russian territory, and those distances are still growing. A drone threat has now been declared even in the Tyumen region, 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine's border. Think about what that means. More than 70% of Russia's entire population now lives within Ukrainian drone range. The factories Russia planned to move beyond the Urals to protect them from this war, Ukraine got there first. There is no safe rear anymore. Drop a comment below right now. Do you think Putin survives 2026? We read every single one. And while Russian civilians are looking up at the sky, their government is quietly looking down at its books and panicking. The federal budget deficit in just the first quarter of 2026 has already hit 4.6 trillion rubles. That number was supposed to be the ceiling for the entire year. In 3 months, Russia blew past it entirely. Regional governments across the Federation are collapsing financially. In the Komi Republic, profit tax revenues have fallen by half. In the Orenburg region, revenues are down 40%. Investment is now shrinking in 46 of Russia's 80 regions, double the number from just a year ago. Russian railways, Gazprom, Kamaz, Avtovaz, industrial giants that were supposed to be untouchable, are now cutting workers or forcing unpaid leave. And overdue wage arrears across Russia have climbed past 2.13 billion rubles as of late March. Economists warn that summer will accelerate this. Seasonal slowdowns, structural debt, and a government with nothing left to offer will likely force mass layoffs across multiple sectors in the coming months. The Kremlin's response to all of this? Approving a new gambling zone in a ski resort in the Altai Republic to squeeze casino tax revenues into the national budget. That is not the policy of a confident empire. That is the improvisation of a government running out of options. And it goes deeper than the budget. Russia has begun selling its gold. According to Ukrainian foreign intelligence, sales began in November 2025, the first time Russia's central bank has sold gold directly to domestic buyers in years. For 2 decades, Russia built its gold reserves as a symbol of sovereign strength, a financial fortress against Western pressure. Now that fortress is being quietly dismantled piece by piece to fund a war that shows no sign of ending. The signal is impossible to ignore. A country that hoarded gold as a symbol of power is now spending it to survive. Meanwhile, on Russia's own borders, the geopolitical ground is shifting in ways Moscow cannot control. In Yerevan, Armenia held its first ever summit with the European Union. Bilateral agreements were signed. EU officials formally recognized Armenia's European ambitions that Armenia enshrined in law in March 2025. Armenia's participation in Russia's Collective Security Treaty Organization is now frozen. Analysts say a full withdrawal is no longer a question of whether, but when. This is not a minor development. Armenia was one of Russia's closest allies in the post-Soviet space. Its pivot toward Brussels is a signal that even the countries Moscow considered loyal are doing the math, and Moscow is coming up short. Zelenskyy visited Yerevan just ahead of the summit, the first Ukrainian presidential visit to the country in 24 years. There was no official response from the Kremlin, not a statement, not a press release, not even a denial. Just silence, and according to analysts, that silence speaks to one thing: powerlessness. Sweden has meanwhile detained another vessel from Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea, a tanker sailing under a Syrian flag with an unknown destination, now under criminal investigation. This year alone, Sweden has detained 5 vessels connected to Russian sanctions evasion. Ukraine is calling for the blockade to go further. Analysts estimate that targeting another 200 to 400 tankers and cutting off the infrastructure supporting them could strip Russia of up to $400 billion in foreign currency revenue. Russia's shadow fleet now makes up roughly 20% of the world's entire tanker fleet, constantly rotating flags, names, crews, and registrations to evade detection. The net is tightening, slowly, but it is tightening. And while the Kremlin hunts for revenue abroad, it has turned directly on its own citizens at home. New amendments to the tax code that came into force at the start of 2026 have already driven up the cost of basic household goods. Customs duties of up to 50% have been applied to clothing, cosmetics, and non-food items imported from more than 50 countries. Everything from daily groceries to imported goods is now 15 to 30% more expensive. VAT is being introduced on foreign marketplace goods. Property taxes are rising. The government is not absorbing the cost of this war. It is passing it directly onto the Russian people, and the Russian people are beginning to feel every ruble of it. This is what the slow collapse of an empire looks like from the inside. Not one dramatic fall, but 100 small failures happening at once. Drones over cities that were never supposed to be targets. Budget deficits blowing past projections in a single quarter. Gold reserves quietly sold. Industrial giants cutting workers. Allies pivoting west. And a government so desperate for revenue that it is taxing its own population into poverty while opening casinos in ski resorts. The Wall Street Journal's conclusion is sharp and simple. The most likely trajectory for Russia is not a dramatic military defeat. It is a grinding, slow-motion depletion of its human capital, its economic base, and ultimately its political stability. Not an explosion, an exhaustion. This summer, Zelenskyy has said, will be the moment Putin must decide: escalate further or choose diplomacy. The pressure campaign from Ukraine, its allies, and the weight of Russia's own internal collapse will define what that decision looks like. We will be tracking every development as it happens, every single day. If today's analysis helped you understand what's really happening inside Russia, share this with one person who needs to see it. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button. This is exactly the kind of daily coverage you won't find anywhere else.